Welcome back to Propaganda by the Sea. You might have noticed that I haven't put anything out in a couple of months, and there's a few reasons for that. One of them is I've just been busy with the nursery business and the growing season and community projects like Mount Joy Orchard. Another one is I used up my backlog of interviews that I recorded over last winter. And the third one is people stopped replying to my interview requests. I imagine they're also just busy or overwhelmed with the fucked up state of the world. But I haven't been able to successfully schedule an interview in a hot minute. So yesterday I sent out some new pitches to people and sent some follow-up emails on people who, seemed somewhat interested in an interview but hadn't gotten back to me in a while. So I hope to have some new full-length episodes coming soon. And I definitely will try to allocate a little bit of time to work on a shorts episode sometime in October, which gives me less than 10 days to do that. But yeah, I could probably make that happen. But for today, I'm going to re-podcast a episode of Tim's old podcast, the Solecast, that I was the guest on. And this was the first time I ever appeared on a podcast. I first met Tim when he just kind of randomly showed up at my nursery one day. And I'm like, who is this weirdo anarchist guy who's super into Turkish rocket? And had a fun conversation with him, sold him some plants. And then the next day he sent me an email inviting me on the podcast. And that's the podcast that you'll get to hear today. And if you enjoy it, I hope you dig into the archives of the Solecast. There's lots of interesting stuff in there, from radical politics to underground music to some more food autonomy focused content. So there's many, many good episodes to enjoy in that backlog if you're looking for some new podcast to check out.
Yeah. Welcome to the motherfucking Solecast. Today's guest is Aaron Parker of Edgewood Nurseries, and we're mainly going to be talking about perennial vegetables and food forestry. I've talked about this in some prior episodes, but really wanted to go in depth on this. So folks who are interested in maybe trying out some of these vegetables, Aaron's gonna just drop a whole bunch of some of his favorite ones, and these ones happen to be a lot of the ones that I've been deeply interested in. So we're gonna be talking about that. We're gonna kind of be talking about the history of food forest gardening or food forest agriculture in North America. We're gonna be talking about the sort of nutritional benefits of eating perennial vegetables versus annuals. For those who don't know the difference, it's kind of a weird linguistic thing, like fiction versus nonfiction. Perennial means comes back every year, bigger and badder. Annual means you have to physically plant it every year. And we've talked about food forest stuff in the past on the podcast, but food forest gardening is it's associated with permaculture, but it's not exclusive to it. And it's just this idea that you can create these forests that are totally edible and self-regenerating. And that idea is just way more interesting and exciting, and you can actually get more food out of that than you can out of a regular garden. And what's also awesome about it is just the range of flavors and the sort of stuff that we just, we only eat 15 vegetables. And I love the idea of kind of breaking open the regular diet and just eating crazy ass shit from your yard. So yeah, Aaron is a horticulturist. He's he's a landscaper. He runs this nursery, which has one of the best stocks of permaculture and perennial vegetables I've ever seen. I went down there, bought a bunch of stuff, like stuff that I've been trying to grow for years and haven't been able to grow from seed. And so it's just really awesome to do this interview and kind of talk about this stuff. And I want to send a huge shout out to all the people who've emailed me over the last couple months. I've heard from a lot of folks in New England doing cool shit. And if you have any ideas for podcasts or want to send me a shout, give me some feedback, holler at me on Twitter, MC Soul, holler at me on the gram, Young Soul. And if you want to help this project continue to grow, please sign up via Patreon, patreon.com/SOLEONE. And if you subscribe in iTunes, please rate that shit, review that shit so that we can defeat our robot overlords. I guess I'll say that, over the past, since May, really, we started packing our shit up and moving east to set up out here. And I totally underestimated what a massive project it was going to be, sort of getting set up in this kind of fixer-upper farmhouse. And so it's really, in between that and getting ready for the move, it really, really hurt my output. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I'm not apologizing or anything, because life is more important than creating content. But we're all set up over here, and I got tons of episodes lined up for the next couple months, and I'm just excited to get back to work and get back to making music and get back to creating these podcasts. So if you got some cool shit going on, if you got a project you think I should know about, pop me an email, SOLE@SOLEONE.org. And so without further ado, I'm going to drop an advertisement from one of the homies in the Channel Zero podcast network, and then we're going to jump right into this interview. So thanks for listening, and again, I hope you try out some of the stuff that he's talking about in this interview, because it's a great podcast episode. What they selling. Yup. We ain't buying. There is no running. There is no hiding. There's only fighting or dying. It's going down, and you're invited for what they selling. We ain't buying. There is no running. There is no hiding. There's only fighting or dying.
It's Going Down is a digital community center from anarchist, anti-fascist, autonomous, anti-capitalist, and anti-colonial movements. Our mission is to provide an autonomous and resilient platform to publicize and promote revolutionary theory and action.
Go to itsgoingdown.org for daily updates. Check out our online store for ways to donate, and rate and follow us on iTunes if you like this podcast.
Aaron Parker, what up, man? How's it going? Welcome to the Solecast.
It's going pretty well. I'm enjoying the wettest summer that we've had in quite a while, which is great because I don't have to water anything.
It's crazy. I know we were just kind of talking about Colorado stuff, but literally when I moved here, just for the fuck of it, there were beds. So I just threw a bunch of seeds in the ground, like sorrel or, just whatever I had laying around, and everything has sprouted. And I'm like, I don't even have a hose, I haven't even watered anything. And it's so wet here that everything just grows automatically. It's like a big greenhouse.
It certainly feels like that. And it's not like that every year, but we've been lucky to get pretty consistent rain this one.
Yeah, it's nice and humid. So I discovered you when I was researching people who were doing food forest sort of permaculture-y sort of stuff in Maine, and I found this article about you, and so I started checking out your nursery and went down there, and honestly, I was so blown away at how your food forest farm looked, just aesthetically. It was just the way everything popped, the combination of flowers and shrubs and trees. It's just such a it's a really awesome project you got going over there. So I'm just
Thank
wondering,
you.
how long have you had a nursery for?
The nursery is in year like 5 or 6, depending on how you look at it. I've been landscaping for, like 15 years now. And after I'd been working for my neighbor landscaping for a while, I started working on my own and decided that I really wanted to focus on edible landscapes and kitchen gardens. And once I kind of got going on that, I was finding that a lot of the plants that I wanted to use in the landscapes that I was designing really weren't available, and either weren't available locally or I just couldn't find them for sale anywhere. So I started growing a little bit of nursery stock, basically just for landscaping clients and for my own garden. And then I really found that I enjoyed just growing those plants in my own space more than I enjoyed landscaping. So I still make most of my money landscaping, but I'm kind of on a vague 10-year plan to do a lot more nursery production and less off-farm work.
Yeah, that makes sense, with a kid and just wanting to get more into that. You come from a kind of anarcho DIY background? Is that like a punk background?
Yeah, definitely kind of grew up in the punk scene, and the house where I live now is basically in the backyard of my dad's house. And at my dad's house, there's a barn that we used to have shows in for several years. And even like before we built the interior walls in our house, we had shows here. And I'm a bit out of the loop now, but not completely.
Yeah. I don't know. I love the idea of concerts in barns, though. That sounds awesome.
That's definitely something that happens in Maine.
Awesome.
Kind of on the regular.
Awesome. I would imagine it up north at the kind of Beehive Collective world.
Yeah, for sure.
Do you know those people? Just curious.
A little bit. I know Kevin, who's a longtime person there in passing, and I've known a lot of people who have lived and worked there for some period of time. But I think there's a fairly there's a good amount of turnover there.
Yeah, I guess I'm just fascinated at trying to find the radical underbelly of Maine, just I don't know, going to local Sprouts or just don't know. I guess it'll take a while.
Yeah, it's there, and a lot of those people are involved in agriculture in some way, and seems to be more and more. That's where a lot of the people involved in radical politics are kind of putting their day job energy.
Hey, sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Well, so you're pretty much, are you self-taught? Would you say you're a self-taught horticulturist?
Yeah, for the most part. I definitely learned a lot from my neighbor who I worked for doing landscaping for many years. But I have really never had any formal schooling. I was homeschooled through high school and have never been to college, and I just kind of have always worked mostly seasonally because I'm working with plants. So that gives me a lot of time in the winter to really study and read and get a lot of the sort of book learning side of things, as opposed to all the stuff that I'm working with hands-on when there's non-snow on the ground.
That's awesome. I noticed you have a greenhouse. Are you still growing stuff in the winter?
We've had some degree of season extension with the hoop house every year, but never really done a really good job with it. So we've never had stuff all the way through the winter, but we're hoping that this year is going to be the year where we get everything in totally on time and manage it a little bit more carefully to have stuff that's going to make it all the way through the winter.
Yeah, that's the stuff that seems like really cool that you can do in Maine. Is like, I mean, you can do it everywhere, but I was just surprised to see people in Maine using cold frames. Cold frame in a greenhouse, and you can still.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
It really is, and it's a pretty amazing thing to go into an unheated greenhouse in like late February and see stuff growing. And it definitely takes the edge off of winter.
Yeah. That's what I'm hoping for. Yeah, I was like, because I have some friends who have those climate battery greenhouses. Yeah. And that you can have like oranges up in the mountains or whatever. And I was thinking, okay, we'll have like a little Mediterranean greenhouse that with like a hammock in there. And just so in January we can feel like we're somewhere else.
That sounds pretty amazing.
Hey, you can steal it, it's all yours, man.
Yeah.
So as someone, you've been doing, you kind of don't like to use the word permaculture to describe how you identify yourself?
Yeah, just because there's often this misuse of the word permaculture to mean something a little too specific. So permaculture, as I understand it, is a design system, and depending on what piece of land you're working with and what your goals are, you can get radically different looking systems that would still qualify as a permaculture system. So you could be growing all annuals in a very specific way that works to meet your goals and works within the system of the design system and the ethics of permaculture. And most people would say, it's not permaculture. Permaculture means forest gardens or swales. And all those things are techniques that are great and useful, but they're tools that can be used in a permaculture system. They are not permaculture itself. And a lot of my stuff, I never sort of went through that design process or used that design system. So even though you could look at my homestead or my gardens and be like, yeah, that's permaculture, I don't necessarily see it that way. And I often wish that I had a better understanding of permaculture when I started, because I would have made less mistakes. At least I think I would have. But I'm very happy with how things are now, and as I integrate new areas, I definitely try and do more planning than I have done previous to now.
Have you read this, like the people who talk about how, like, before, in pre-colonial United States or throughout the world, like food forestry as a practice by indigenous peoples, and how people lived for tens of thousands of years? Are you familiar with that line of thinking?
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating, and it seems like a lot of North America, and to maybe even a larger degree South America, were some of the largest and most successful agro-forestry systems that the world has ever seen. And it's really neat to think about that being kind of the long-term history of the landscape that I'm living on. And I just wish there was more information available, and that that system hadn't been destroyed by European introduced diseases as the first blow, and European colonization and genocide as the aftermath of that.
Right. Yeah, I just from herbalist friends and like combining with stuff from like, I don't know, braiding sweetgrass, I just think about we've just lost so much,
Yeah, and a lot of that information at least appears to be really, really lost, because there's a lot of people have kind of at least a baseline idea of what indigenous American agriculture was like, with the Three Sisters polyculture and some of those other traditional annual crops, but that was only one aspect of what indigenous people were doing before colonization, and there was it appears that lots of different groups were either using agro-forestry models or sort of a tending the wild type model, which could certainly be viewed as agroforestry.
Right.
And it seems like it was very, very successful, and it's a shame that got destroyed.
Yeah, because when I was moving out here, I bought some like forager books. Just because I'm going to live near a forest, I should learn how to eat all the stuff out here. And then as you're reading through this book, it's like, holy shit, there's so much fucking wild edible food all around us. And, and I guess like the thing I read in those books is like they talk about how when Native Americans were no longer tending to those forests, they fell into disrepair. Everything was swallowed by weeds, but there's still plenty of shit to eat out there.
Yeah, but we're basically looking at remnants of an amazing system that was largely tended and to some degree engineered by humans, which is really, really interesting when you think about how now a lot of people, ecologists and people who really care about the environment and the ecosystem that they live in, think of humans having purely negative impacts. And that's one thing I do really like about permaculture, is this idea that humans can have a really positive impact on the environment around them. We just need to not screw it up. So we can use our incredible power to change our landscapes and change our ecosystems in a way that's really positive, both for ourselves, but for all the other organisms that that we share space with.
Yeah, for sure. And also, one of the things I love about food and like about whatever, like, for instance, like your Project Mount Joy, the public food forest y'all are doing. It's like that. I feel like that shit also, it decreases alienation. It brings people from different age groups into contact with each other, and it's a lot of great things that can come out of this stuff. Well, let me ask you this. So you've been doing food forest style stuff for a while. Can you explain why you prefer it to other methods, and does it feed your family?
Yeah. So I like it for lots of different reasons. Perhaps the first one, and the one that really kind of hooked me into it, was how unusual it was, because I'm fascinated whenever I sort of get to meet a new plant and have this new flavor and new thing to observe. That's super exciting for me. And all of the annual vegetables are kind of really familiar and more run-of-the-mill, and all the stuff that grows in the food garden or the forest garden is much more diverse and unusual. So that's kind of what hooked me into it. The next positive aspect is it's much easier to grow perennials. There's really a lot less inputs of time, and they don't need super rich soil, which is great because the native soil on the land where I live is terrible. And yeah, it's just way easier to grow perennials. And as far as does it feed my family, it definitely does. It can be a little bit of a hard sell for my kid, who is less excited about new flavors and weird tasting things than I am. And perennials don't tend to have as long of a harvest window as annual vegetables. So we definitely grow annuals too, and there are certain times of the year, like right now, where most of the most of the vegetables coming out of the garden are annuals. Most fruit things, whether they're trees, bushes, brambles, those tend to be perennials, obviously. So most of the fruit coming out of the garden is coming off of perennials. But right now, the annuals are producing more vegetables. But another nice thing about perennials is their primary season of production tends to be in the shoulder seasons. So within about a week of the snow melting, there's usually perennial vegetables that are harvestable here. And it would definitely take several weeks or even several months, depending on what you're growing and how much of an early start you got in a windowsill or a greenhouse or whatever, to get any of the annuals really producing. So early in the spring, we eat tons of perennial vegetables, and most of the perennial vegetables tend to put out another big flush of production in like mid-autumn. So when that happens, we'll be eating a lot of those again too. And there's definitely stuff like Hablitzia that has a really, really long harvest season. So we'll eat that, throughout the summer.
Hablitzia? What the hell is that?
Hablitzia is probably my favorite perennial vegetable. It's a vining perennial spinach relative, and the leaf is just like really tender and really tasty, and it's just a prolific vine. And it's something that I learned about from Eric Tonesmeyer years and years ago when he gave a workshop in Portland. And he was like, I'm going to tell you all about this plant, and it's incredible, but there's only one downside, and that is you can't get it anywhere. So I started searching for it, and it took me multiple years to get a hold of the plant, and then a couple more years to really grow it out until I had a lot of it growing here. But now I grow the seed of that as a cash crop that I sell to Fedco Seeds.
Nice.
And that's actually just the seeds of that plant are a pretty good chunk of my income, which is awesome. And it's also been amazing to be able to share this really productive and delicious perennial crop kind of out with the world.
I'm looking at it online. This is the Caucasian mountain spinach.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I
bought some of this from you.
Yeah. And I really hate that common name, which Caucasian mountain spinach is a Fedco coinage. Before that, the common name was Caucasian spinach, and it's really confusing, I think, because it's not technically spinach. And when you look at like the structure of the plant, it doesn't resemble spinach hardly at all. And the word Caucasian, which means from the Caucasus Mountains or the Caucasus region, people often understand to mean white. So when you talk about Caucasian spinach, people are like, oh, so that's like some sort of white spinach or something? And that's why Fedco put the word mountain in there to, clarify that this is a spinach-like plant from the Caucasus Mountains. But I'd rather just call it Hablitzia, which really has no other, that word doesn't mean anything else except this one plant. And I think it sounds cool. It's like, people know what hosta is.
Right. And
hosta is not just the common name for that plant, but it's also the name of the genus.
I'm trying to decolonize my diet, man. And I was like, oh shit, this is like what my white devil ancestors were eating, 10,000 years ago when they came out of the caves. Like, this is what I'm going to eat.
Quite possibly that could be literally true. Hablitzia in the wild does seem to be associated with limestone caves. Like, you often find it growing around the mouth of caves, or at least a couple instances of people finding it have been that. And it's one of those things where you can look at it and be like, wow, is it growing around the mouth of the caves because this is like a really great food for humans, and humans used to use these caves as dwellings and would like plant this here?
Wow. That's it.
So yeah, it's a neat plant.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I should probably just delete all that anyway. I'd hate for Richard Spencer or some white supremacist to hear that and be like, "Yes, this is gonna be our official food from now on."
That would fucking break my heart.
Oh man. All right. Well, we just kind of went in depth about Hablitzia. But before we get into that, I kind of just wanted to talk to you about Mount Joy in Portland.
Yep.
It's a public. It's called a public fruit orchard, but it's basically a food forest.
Yep.
Can you talk about that project a little bit?
Sure. So Mount Joy Orchard started, I want to say 5 years ago, and actually I can go a little bit further back. So Mount Joy is kind of tucked into a corner of the Eastern Promenade Park in Portland. And it's Portland, Maine, in case there's any confusion. And for many, many years in the recent history, that part of the park was just lawn. So it's just mown grass. And it's a steep enough slope that no one was really doing anything with it. So eventually, the city decided to stop mowing it so much and go down to mowing it like once a year-ish. And it became sort of this field or meadow, and they started reintroducing a lot of native species there. And that was really cool. And then I believe it was 5 years ago, they decided to plant some apple trees. Great. So they planted this block of 12 apple trees just off of Washington Ave. But they were just like first-year apple trees. So it's basically a stick with some leaves on it, growing in like shoulder-high grass. So they were really struggling. So kind of the call went out from the city to see if there was anybody who wanted to kind of adopt these trees and, give them some care and a little more specialized attention than the city parks crew were able to provide them with. And a couple of my friends heard about that and thought that would be a good project and invited me to come work with them. And we were kind of imagining, we're going to cut down the really tall grass and put down some sheet mulch, maybe plant some comfrey, and that's probably about it. But we met there at, like 5 or 6 on some summer evening. And if you ever go to check out the orchard, which you should, I recommend going in the evening because the place has just gorgeous sunsets. It's got an incredible view of the city, and it's just a really beautiful piece of land. So we were really just inspired by the site, and we're like, forget about doing something small. We should really go for it. And we should plant a greater diversity of trees, and we should make some big sheet mulch beds and plant a full understory and really do this right. And that's kind of how the current incarnation of Mount Joy came to be. So it's an all volunteer public orchard. Anything there is free to pick for anybody who wants to come pick it. The production is just barely starting. There are a few mature trees up at the top of the hill, but they're really more associated with the school, and the stuff that's like on the slope that's for the general public to pick is just starting to start producing. And we had a pretty good crop of peaches last year, and I think we're going to have a decent amount of peaches, apples, and pears this year. But through the past 5 years, we've had one work party a month through the growing season, and that's enough to keep everything in pretty good shape. We've gone from about a dozen trees to just about 100 trees, and we've gone from mostly apples with a couple of pears and a couple of peaches to I think we're over 20 species of fruit and nut trees. So it's been a really amazing project to work on, and maybe the most amazing part of it is it's really fun. So all of the original organizers are still involved.
That definitely means it's fun.
Yeah, for sure, and it's like not stressful at all to be an organizer for this project, or to have this sort of long-term commitment to a volunteer project. But yeah, that's the gist of it.
That's awesome. And I mean, there's still projects down on, what is it, like Franklin Arterial. I mean, there's still a lot
Kennedy
of
Park.
Yeah, there's still a lot of people in that area that could really benefit from having something like that around, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Although I will say that might be our greatest failing is we have not had much interaction with the immigrant population who live like all over that area of town. And that's something that we're like actively working on, but haven't gotten much interest from that community yet. But we're trying.
Well, to me, what's exciting about it is it seems like it's a no bullshit education site for people who want to learn this stuff. Also, it's like get your hands dirty. Yeah,
and that aspect of it has been really, really successful. So part of our goal was to show sort of a model of urban agriculture that would be easily replicated either in other parks, other cities, or just in people's backyards. And lots of people have been like, wow, that's really cool. I want that in my neighborhood. So now there are 2 other urban orchards in Portland that are basically inspired by Mount Joy. And a lot of the community gardens in Portland are also getting not necessarily a full orchard, but like at least a few fruit trees and some perennial vegetables and perennial herbs that are meant to be like part of the commons of the community garden. So you've got your community garden plot that you can grow your annual vegetables on, but then you also have access to perennial herbs and fruit trees and fruiting bushes that are like, part of the commons.
That's awesome. I'm just wondering, do you have anything to say about the nutritional value of perennials versus annuals?
Yeah. There's not a whole lot of like hard data on it. But what hard data there is, or at least that I've seen, really does support the idea that perennials tend to be much more nutrient dense than annual vegetables. And I think a lot of that just has to do with a lot of perennials being like almost not domesticated. To the degree that they are domesticated, they're much closer to their wild ancestors than any of the annual vegetables. And wild plants tend to be much more nutrient dense and much healthier foods than cultivated vegetables. And that's just because, for centuries people have been selecting for, things that are tender and tasty and pretty, or even worse, things that like store well on like in transit. And whenever you select for those things, you tend to inadvertently select away from nutrition, basically. So if you can think of the most sort of highly modified and selected vegetables, say iceberg lettuce, there's obviously a lot less mineral and fiber and lots of other nutrients in there than in some of the more wild vegetables. Another aspect of that is plants don't really pick up nutrients just through diffusion through the soil. In any sort of organic or natural system, there's almost no just soluble nutrients hanging out in the soil. Everything is tied up in some living thing. And when you have perennials, you also tend to have a no-till system where you've got a lot of biodiversity in the soil. And the more diversity in the soil, that means the more bacteria, archaea, and fungi there are that can really break down minerals and turn them into bioavailable nutrients. So not only do perennial vegetables tend to have just more more genetic capacity for holding nutrition in their leaves and stems and fruit, but they have more access to nutrients, especially like micronutrients, because of the soil biology that they're living with and working with.
That's amazing. When you were describing that, it was making me think of like like the way people describe fermentation, making the nutrients from our vegetables more available to us.
Yeah, it's very similar. And a lot of people kind of don't have a clear understanding of how plants work. And this is actually something that I've learned not super recently, but fairly recently, learned a lot more about. And I was actually, when I heard some of these facts, I was kind of skeptical and I emailed the teacher afterwards and was like, can you cite a source for that? Because that seems really hard to believe. And specifically, it was about what plants do with the sugar that they make. So plants have this amazing ability of photosynthesis. They can turn sunlight, water, and carbon dioxide into sugar, and they can do it better than anything else on land can. And when you think about that, like where does that sugar go? Where would you think that sugar goes?
Into the soil?
It does. So more than half of it, in a lot of cases, goes into the soil. And not just like into the roots, but it's actually exuded into the soil to feed the soil biology that can, process minerals and process and move other nutrients around much better than plants possibly can. And then the plants get back from that soil biology everything they need.
That's I mean, that was a guess. It wasn't like I knew anything.
No, you nailed it.
Yeah. That's crazy. Yeah, it's amazing. It's so fun to, just hearing some of this stuff reminds me of like reading Gaia's Garden for the first time, and just like my mind just being blown every time I turn the page. Just all this,
totally.
The simple, beautiful, complex shit around us that we take for granted. It's amazing. All right. Well, so a lot of why I wanted to talk to you is because I've just really wanted to do a special on my podcast about perennial vegetables, and you're one of the best sources for this stuff. I mean, I've literally been like trying to order Turkish rocket online for years because I like tried to buy it from seed, a number of these plants, and just like to find it all in Falmouth, Maine, just fucking really blew my mind. It made me feel better about moving here. I was like, all right, there's a place doing awesome shit close by. So yeah, let's just talk about some of your favorite perennial vegetables. We obviously don't have enough time to like explain how to make a food forest or any of that stuff. If people want to learn that, they can go do the research on that stuff. But if people want to try out some of these vegetables or incorporate them, just wanted to kind of just get you to talk about some of your favorite vegetables, perennial vegetables.
Absolutely. I would love to do that. So whenever I'm talking to people about perennial vegetables and, like how to get started with that, I like to encourage people to kind of take a look at what's already growing on the landscape where they live, because there's actually a lot of great perennial vegetables that are kind of ubiquitous in our environments, both native stuff and commonly planted stuff that people don't even realize are edible. And if it's already there, it's ready to be harvested, and you can start immediately, even before you have to add anything. So I think of the classic example being the dandelion. And lots of people know that dandelions are edible. But I think they're really, really underutilized, because most people think of dandelion greens, which are pretty bitter. Like I like dandelion greens all right. But I think dandelion flowers are way more delicious. And really the whole plant is edible and has, a million different uses. I won't go too deep into any one thing. Milkweed is super common around here, especially in sort of regenerating hayfields or like old worn out hayfields, but it really just comes up everywhere. And it's a plant that's really starting to have its 15 minutes in the spotlight or whatever, because it's the food for monarch caterpillars. So a lot of people are like wanting to get milkweed back into the landscape from areas where it's been removed from, because of monarch butterflies. That's awesome, but it's also a great food for humans. And it's such an abundant and productive plant that, once it's established, there can be plenty for the butterflies and the humans. Milkweed is one of the the vegetables that needs particular treatment to be edible, and basically you just need to cook it. It doesn't need anything special beyond that, and you need to harvest it at the right season. So my favorite part are the shoots, which are kind of like tender little asparagus shoots. I think they taste even better than asparagus. But you can also eat the flowers and the young pods, and also any sort of new growth, like the very top couple leaves, as long as they're still small and tender.
So wait, so when you say the shoots, you mean like when they're popping up in the spring, just eating that?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. And I like to just steam those, but they can also be, stir fried, or you can cook them however you want. So milkweed's a great one. Another one of the most ubiquitous landscaping plants, which isn't native, but you just see it everywhere, from like commercial landscaping, home landscaping, parking lots. It's all over the place. Is hosta. And hosta is actually a really great spring vegetable. Like the milkweed, it's best cooked as a shoot. So the leaves come up as like this furled spike, and then they kind of unfurl. And shortly after unfurling, they get pretty fibrous, and they're not poisonous ever, but they're just not that good to eat. But if you get them while they're still kind of rolled up, they are quite delicious. And again, they're everywhere. It's a very low maintenance plant, and very productive. So those are some things to just kind of be aware of, and there's lots more common plants that would fall into the category of perennial vegetables. But basically, it's good to become acquainted with everything that's growing in your landscape, and just kind of be aware of what's good to eat, what's medicinal, what has particular advantages as far as maybe it's food for beneficial insects or anything like that. And then moving on to...
Well, before we move on, I just wanted to ask you, since you mentioned all these sorts of things.
Yep.
Cattails. Have you eaten cattails?
I have eaten cattails.
What do you think, man? From reading, it just looks like the coolest shit.
Yeah, and that's another one where there's lots of different things you can harvest. Mostly I've eaten the cattail shoots in the spring, and they're super delicious. They're like light and crunchy, just a really nice spring vegetable. But you can also eat the pollen, and I think there's a root tuber that you can harvest as well. I haven't ever eaten the tuber, but I've eaten the pollen and the shoots, and they were both delicious.
Awesome.
Cattails, I think one of the tricky things about them is they're a real like wetland plant,
right?
And the places where you see tons of cattails growing are often like the last place you would want to eat something from.
Like along 295 or something.
Yeah, exactly. Or like the retention pond that holds all the water that runs off a parking lot.
Right.
So, yeah, finding a spot that doesn't have too much gross runoff in it is probably key. But as long as you've got a good spot, yeah, I think cattails are great.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, what about just more standard perennial veggies?
Cool. So perennial vegetables that you might want to like try out in your garden. We already talked about Hablitzia. That's probably my personal favorite. And then next on the list, and often one that I recommend to people, like if you're just going to plant one perennial vegetable, this is probably the one, and that's called sea kale. And just to reduce confusion, I'll also give botanical names. So sea kale's botanical name is Cramby maritima. And it is a pretty close relative of kale. but it's in a different genus, so it's not that closely related. And the reason that I often recommend this to people who are starting off is that it has a lot of different harvest windows, so you can get a lot of different things from a single plant, and all of those harvests pretty closely resemble some familiar crop. So the first thing to harvest in the early spring is the leaves, and when the leaves are really young, they're very much like kale, and as they start to get larger and somewhat tougher, they're closely resemble like collard greens. So those are good pretty much throughout the season. And then in late summer, or late spring rather, it'll start to flower, and you can eat the flower buds, which look like tiny little broccolis, and those are quite delicious. And then it blooms, and the flowers, I assume, are edible. I've never eaten them because they smell so nice. They smell like I had the strong honey scent, and they're really attractive to lots of beneficial insects, especially syrphid flies. So I usually will let the flowers go by. And then the last harvest is the immature seed pods, which are fairly small, but there's usually quite a few of them. And those taste like snap peas.
Wow.
So it's really an amazingly productive and really a very beautiful plant that it used to be fairly common as an ornamental, but really a great plant, and it has a long history of human use as food, especially in England.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's another plant I bought from you that I've been trying to grow from seed for years that never worked for me.
Yeah, a lot of people have trouble with sea kale seeds, and I think the reason is when you buy them, they're usually they look very large and feel very light, and that's because what you're getting is not just the seed, but the seed in a pod. And that pod is adapted to be carried on the tide because, it's called sea kale because it naturally grows on beaches. And so it's adapted to have this little sort of life jacket around the seed so that it'll get carried out into the ocean and wash up on some other beach and start growing there. But it's kind of difficult for the seedling to emerge from that. So if you ever try growing it from seed, or if anybody listening to the podcast wants to grow sea kale from seed, the way to make it easy is to just break that little pod off, and inside is a much smaller seed that will germinate way faster and way easier if you remove the pod.
That's awesome.
And that also reminds me of one more thing I wanted to mention about perennial vegetables in general, which is a lot of perennial vegetables are really salt tolerant. So things like sea kale, asparagus, Turkish rocket, all these plants can take a huge amount of salt in the soil, which is a fairly unusual trait for plants to have, and could potentially be really important to the future of agriculture as humans are drawing down so much groundwater in a lot of places. Something that happens is salts tend to infiltrate the water supply more. Also, using salt-based fertilizers can bring up the salinity in groundwater in some places. So having crops that are already adapted to withstand high salinity is something that is important as more and more places in the world are going to be struggling with either too much salt in the soil or too much salt in the water that's available.
Right, and that will even happen in places like we're at. As the ocean level rises, the groundwater will get saltier.
Yeah, for sure. So salt is going to be more and more of an issue as we move into this crazy future that we're headed for. So I think. And that's sort of just one aspect, one way that perennial vegetables tend to be much more resilient to all sorts of changes, whether they're, big, large-scale changes like climate change, or even just the weather, like, which is related to climate, but, sort of a microcosm of what climate is.
Right. They can take an ass kicking and come back next year.
Exactly. So some other favorite perennial vegetables. Turkish rocket is one of the most vigorous and easy to grow perennial vegetables that I've ever worked with. To the point where in some places it becomes a weed. And for anyone growing it, I would just recommend when the flowers start to go by to just lop them off before they turn into viable seeds. Because if you let it seed in around itself, your patch of Turkish rocket tends to get bigger and bigger, which is not necessarily a problem. I guess it depends on how much Turkish rocket you want to eat. But Turkish rocket, while it is super easy to grow, is a much more seasonal vegetable. It's really something you're mostly going to eat in early spring, in that shoulder season, which is great, before any of your annual crops are ready. But while the leaves are quite young, they're good to eat. And it has kind of a spicy, mustardy flavor. And then the flower buds appear, and there's usually a ton of those. So you can really get quite a large harvest of them. And those are very much like broccoli rabe. I would say they're a little bit spicier and a little bit more bitter than most broccoli rabes. And they have a little bit of kind of a seaweed taste to them, which is kind of neat. And even if that doesn't sound totally appealing to everyone, Turkish rocket has repeatedly passed my standard test of new vegetable palatability, which is I bring it to a potluck and see if people will eat it, being totally unaware of what it is. It's just a steamed vegetable on the table, and people have been generally quite into it. So that's a nice one, and it's
of all the ones I've read about, that one seems like the most exciting.
Yeah, and it's just really incredibly easy to grow. So that's to me the ease of cultivation and like really just large production of Turkish rocket is just phenomenal and kind of unbeatable. Also, whatever flower buds you don't harvest turn into these beautiful yellow flowers that are good, again, at attracting syrphid flies, which is our second largest group of beneficial insects here in Maine. So that's good, and there's not much other food for them at that time of year. So I never harvest all of the flower buds, which is easy now that I have lots and lots of this plant going on.
That's awesome. I'm jealous, man.
Oh, just let yours go to seed for a couple years, and you'll have all the Turkish rocket you want.
Yay.
Let's see, what else? Sorrel, garden sorrel, Rumex acetosa is another really nice perennial vegetable. There's lots of things that have a similar flavor, but it's a very sort of sour, lemony flavor. There's a few fairly common garden weeds that have the similar similar flavor and some of them are close relatives of garden sorrel. But the main problem with those ones is their leaves tend to be tiny and really finicky to pick. So I really like to have a nice garden sorrel that's more cultivated just because it's way easier to harvest. And the harvest window for most garden sorrels is sort of just the spring, and then in summer it bolts and goes to seed. And then it's sort of unavailable for a couple months until it puts out some fall leaves too. But there are cultivars of garden sorrel that never bloom and are only propagated vegetatively. And those have a super long harvest window. Basically, if there's not snow on the ground, there's something good there to harvest, which is a really nice feature.
Yeah, sorrel's amazing. I got like microgreen sorrel, and I just had so much of it that I just threw it everywhere, and it all grew. And so I just had like way more sorrel than I could ever eat. But it's an awesome vegetable. It tastes really good.
Yeah, I really like that one. Stinging nettles is another really nice vegetable. Also common, pretty well known as a medicinal plant. I would say I more use it as a vegetable, especially in the spring. And it's called stinging nettle because the mature plant is covered in what look like little hairs, and if you touch them, or if you get them stuck in your skin, they sting and kind of burn for a few seconds. And some people have a worse reaction and will get kind of like a rash from it. So you need to be really careful when you're harvesting it. But as soon as the plant is dried or heated in any way, the sting is sort of deactivated and you can eat it without worrying about getting stung. And that's another one that's best first thing in the spring, and then towards.
And how do you use it?
I like it as a steamed green. It's also really good in egg dishes, like a quiche or a frittata, or just like in scrambled eggs. But yeah, I eat it like pretty frequently in the spring, just steamed. I'm sure there's a million uses for it. Basically, anytime you would use a cooked green vegetable, stinging nettle does quite nicely.
That's awesome. Yeah, sorry to cut you off. I did a podcast on medicinal herbs a couple months ago, and the woman was pushing stinging nettles as an alternative to spinach as well. And she was saying, like, make your sog with stinging nettles, and you'll never want to eat spinach again.
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with that. And it's like many perennial vegetables, much more nutrient dense. And spinach is like definitely a high nutrition food, but not when compared to stinging nettles. It's really got tons of iron, calcium, and lots of other mineral nutrients in it, which is something we all need.
That's amazing.
The seeds are also edible. So once it starts to flower, the leaves are less desirable to eat. But when it's kind of done flowering, you can also collect the seeds as a food source. Let's see. Let's move on to a tree. So tree leaves are something that there's lots of edible tree leaves, but it's not something that many people are familiar with growing or eating as a vegetable. So there's 3 trees that I want to at least mention. 2 of them are really easy to forage in Maine and in a lot of places. So American basswood, or Tilia americana, as well as American beech, which I think is Fagus grandifolia or grandiflora. But those trees are really common in woodlands, at least around here. Mostly the beech are common in woodlands, and basswood is a really common street tree in cities and in suburban areas. And they both have really delicious spring leaves. And I'll eat a lot of them just when I'm like outside walking around, and also usually collect a bunch and throw them in a salad. And their harvest window is fairly short, but while they're available, they're incredibly abundant and delicious, and I would imagine full of great nutrition, although I've never seen any hard science on that.
But do you cook them, or you just eat them raw?
I generally just eat them raw. You certainly could cook them, but I have never done that.
And the beech nuts you can eat raw as well, right?
Yes, but most of them don't fill. So I haven't had much luck collecting beech nuts. Yeah, and I think part of that is that a lot of the beeches in southern Maine, at least, are really struggling with a disease complex called beech bark disease, which is a combination of an insect pest and then a fungal disease that comes in after the insect pest has damaged the tree bark. So naturally, or like undiseased beech trees have this beautiful, very, very smooth, silvery bark. And now, like, something like 99% of beeches in southern Maine have this beech bark disease, and it makes the bark all rough and cracked and broken. And the trees are just getting more and more stressed out. So I think it's getting harder and harder for them to have enough energy to fill the nuts to a point where they're good food for humans. So that is
too bad.
Unfortunate. Luckily, there are some that are resistant to the fungal disease. So we're not hopefully going to lose beeches as a species in the forest, but they're going through a really, really hard time, and it's going to be a while before there's any chance of them bouncing back.
Sucks, man. Can a vegan catch a break, man? All I want is a fucking nut tree that doesn't have some weird ass disease that's going to kill it in 20 years. Is that too much to ask?
Well, there's after like 150 years, there's about to be hopefully some good headway on American chestnuts. So hopefully in the next like 10 years, we should start seeing American chestnuts that are blight resistant or blight immune.
Yeah, I mean, Americans just don't know how good chestnuts are. Like, we don't, it's not really part of our diet anymore, but man, they're so fucking good.
Yeah, they're amazing, and they're so productive. I think they will definitely, well, let's put it this way. If there are any humans left in a couple hundred years, we're going to be eating a lot more chestnuts than grains, hopefully, because what we have to do to produce grains in our current industrial systems is so environmentally dangerous and toxic compared to what you would have to do to get, a crop of chestnuts, that hopefully, we're going to start to see a shift towards these perennial crops and woody crops, and a regenerative form of agriculture that actually, is helping the environment and doing something positive for the earth and all the other species that live here, compared to the mess that is industrialized agriculture.
If we survive a couple hundred years.
Yeah.
All right, what was the other tree?
So the other tree is the fragrant spring tree, or Tuna sinensis, which is a tree from China. And in China, I guess it's fairly common in Szechuan cuisine, which I don't really know anything about. But the tree itself is beautiful. It looks a lot like a sumac, but it's actually a member of the mahogany family. And the flavor of the leaves is just incredible. It's kind of hard to describe, but I guess I would describe it as tasting like brothy, like kind of like a bouillon cube without the salt.
Damn.
So it has this amazing, complex, rich flavor, and it's just in a tree leaf. You mentioned being vegan, and this is someone a while ago was talking about making a vegan version of fish sauce. And this is one of the things that I would think of to get that sort of umami flavor without using animal protein.
Wow. And you would say that instead of salsify, which is always called oyster root, and people say has like a fishy flavor. You don't get that.
Yeah, I mean that's a good option too, or maybe they could both be used. There's also a plant called Hotunia that is the most fishy plant I've ever tasted, and is a culinary herb used in Southeast Asia.
Huh.
But yeah, like I would say Hotunia is much more fishy, and the fragrant spring tree or tuna is much more like umami, like savory tasting.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's a really neat tree and something that I think has a lot of potential.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, it's. I mean, I hate to admit it, but like a huge part of this for me is just finding new tastes. It's like I can talk about like sustainability and all this shit, but it's like at the end of the day, I just want to be able to eat some food I've never tasted before.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of opportunities for that with perennial vegetables.
That's awesome. Well. Did you have anything else you wanted to throw out that you were excited about, or?
I mean, how much time do you have?
Well, I try to always end them around an hour. We're at an hour 10 now, so I'm kind of like, okay, well, we can probably go on for another 3 hours, but
probably could.
Yeah.
I'll mention like let's say 2 more.
Okay.
So let's go with an allium. So there's tons of different edible alliums, and alliums are something that most people are very familiar with. Onions, chives, garlic chives, all really common alliums, but there's like hundreds of edible species out there. And my personal favorite allium to grow is a plant called mouse garlic. It kind of resembles garlic chives, but it's a little bigger, a little more robust, and I like the flavor better. I also think it's prettier. It has like a really big purple flower that is also edible. So that one's nice and just super low maintenance. Really takes care of itself. Even when it's like lost in the weeds, it just keeps growing.
Very pretty plant also.
Yeah, great. Really nice ornamental or there's a guy who I know who's kind of like if you want like the real world expert on perennial vegetables in a temperate climate, there's this guy Stephen Barstow, and he coined this term edible ornamental plants.
Nice.
And mouse garlic is a prime example of an edimental.
Nice.
And then one more that has an interesting story and a lot of great features is a plant that I call Dystania. Its botanical name is Dystania tachysamana. And it's a long season leaf vegetable that has a taste a lot like celery. And it's related to celery. It's in the same family. But it comes up super early in the spring. I've actually seen it set edible leaves underneath snow cover, which is pretty amazing. And then the leaves remain edible throughout the season, and then it puts out another flush in sort of early fall. So it's a great vegetable, but then also midsummer, it blooms and has very large umbel-shaped flowers. So it looks kind of like a giant Queen Anne's lace, and it is one of the most attractive plant to beneficial insects that I have in my garden. And so I have about 200-ish species of plants in the garden, and this one is really like the magnet to a lot of pollinators, and a lot of wasps and stuff come to visit it. So that's a really great additional benefit to that plant.
How do you spell that? I was just trying to look it up. I couldn't find it.
Dystania.
Tachysamana?
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
And the interesting story about that one is that it was brought to North America from Korea by this professor from New Hampshire, Elwin Meader. And somehow it didn't make it into any of the official collections, like university collections or USDA collections. And it did get into the hands of my friend Jack Cortez, who has been growing it for years and years in Unity. And so for several years, the only place in North America that this was growing was in Maine. And then Jack decided that this plant was really amazing and it should get out there a little more, and started like actively, passing out seeds and plants to various people. And now it's starting to kind of take off, at least in the permaculture and regenerative agriculture scene. So it's moving around a little bit. And I recently saw a picture of one that was growing in Jonathan Bates' garden in Massachusetts, and it was like 8 feet tall, which is much larger than I've ever seen. But it can be really productive. It has the potential, and it's also a really high nutrition plant. In Korea, they use it as pig fodder, and it has more total digestible nutrients than alfalfa, which is known for being like a really nutritious animal fodder.
Wow, so that's great if you have goats or chickens or whatever.
Yep. Like definitely a good human food, but you could also grow it on a larger scale to feed animals.
That's amazing. Well, let me ask you this: this is from one of my friends online. Is there any plants that you're looking at growing that you wouldn't have thought about growing before due to global warming? Like, is there stuff that you're looking at growing here in New England over the next 10 to 20 years that you're basically looking at the way the climate's going and saying, by spring 2022, I'll be able to be growing bananas out here?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no perennial vegetables that I can think of that are like that, but there are tree fruits that I'm really excited about that have little or no history in Maine because the climate was just too cold. And now that it's warmed significantly and looks to be just getting warmer and warmer, I think are really great things to be planting because they have minimal pest and disease pressure. And the only thing is sometimes the summer's not hot enough, and the summers are just getting hotter and hotter. So those things are pawpaws and persimmons. And both of these tree fruits are native to, northeastern United States, but never quite as far north and east as Maine. But they grow really nicely here with really, minimal problems. And they're both amazing, delicious fruit.
Yeah, I was very I told you when we got to your house, I had saved my pawpaw tree from Denver and brought it out here, and then I saw yours, and it was like 10 foot tall with fruits on it. I was like, God, man, it's amazing. God,
nice. Well, you'll get there in the not too distant future, especially if we keep having summers like this.
That's right. Thank you, Al Gore. All right. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time and, for what you're doing, man. It's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
If people hearing this are in New England and they want to, come check out your nursery, or if they want to, track your work online or order some of these awesome plants from you, what are the best ways for people to get in touch with you?
Probably through my website, edgewood-nursery.com. And I will be selling plants mail order to anywhere in the U.S. This fall. And for people who are more local, I do have garden tours on the last Saturday of every month at 10:30 in the morning throughout the growing season. So if you want to come by and get a guided tour of the garden, that's the best time to do that.
Awesome. Well, I'm wanting to show my wife, so you'll see us one of those mornings.
All right, cool.
Oh, you know what? I'd like to ask people to throw out a book. Is there any book you recommend people read, or it doesn't even, if it's not a permaculture thing you're reading right now, or just something you're geeking out on?
Sure.
Anything, really. It can be anything.
Can I do a couple?
Yeah, sure.
So, the book Edible Forest Gardens by Dave Jackie and Eric Tonesmeyer was what really got me into, perennial agriculture, and it's an amazing book, especially if you like technical stuff, and if you're real nerdy about that stuff, you'll love it. And then more of a narrative and more specific to perennial vegetables, there's a book called Around the World in 80 Plants by Stephen Barstow. And that's another great read and great reference material.
Awesome. Yeah, that's great. This looks cool. Awesome. Well, thanks again, and have an amazing day.
Yeah, you too.
The wind was a torrent of darkness among dusty trees. Moon was a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas, and the road was a ribbon of moonlight over the purple moor. And the highwayman came riding, riding, riding. Yes, the highwayman came riding up to the old inn door. Over the cobbles he clattered and clashed in the darkened yard. Tapped with his whip on the window, but all was locked and barred. So he whistled a tune to the window, and who should be waiting there but the landlord's black-eyed daughter, Bess, the landlord's daughter, plaiting a dark red love knot into her long black hair. One kiss, my bonny sweetheart, I'm after prize tonight. But I shall be back with the yellow gold before the morning light. Yet if they press me sharply, carry me through the day, oh, then look for me by moonlight. Watch for me by, I'll come to thee by moonlight, though hell should bar the way. He did not come at the dawning, no, he did not come at the noon. Out of the tawny sunset before the rise of the moon, when the road was a gypsy's ribbon, looping the purple moor, a redcoat troop came marching, marching, marching. King George's men came marching up to the old inn door, and they bound the landlord's daughter with many a sniggering jest, and they bound the musket beside her with a barrel beneath her breast. Now keep good watch, and they kissed her. She heard the dead man say, "Whoa, look for me by moonlight. Watch for me by moonlight, and I'll come to thee by moonlight, though hell should bar the way. Look for me by moonlight, hoofbeats ringing clear. Watch for me by moonlight, were they deaf that they did not hear? For he rode on the gypsy highway. She breathed one final breath, then her finger moved in the moonlight. Her musket shattered the moonlight, and it shattered her breast in the moonlight, and warned him with her death. He turned, he spurred on to the west. He did not know who stood, proud with her black hair flowing down, drenched with her own red blood. No, not till the dawn had he heard it, and his face grew gray to hear how Bess, the landlord's daughter, landlord's black-eyed daughter, had watched for her love in the moonlight and died in the darkness there. Back he spurred like a madman, shrieking a curse to the sky, with a white road smoking behind him and his rapier brandished high. Blood red were his spurs in the golden moon, wine red his velvet coat, when they shot him down on the highway, down like a dog on the highway, and he lay in his blood on the highway, with a bunch of lace at his throat. And still of a winter's night, they say, when the wind is in the trees, when the moon is a ghostly galleon tossed upon cloudy seas, when the road is a ribbon of moonlight over the purple moor, oh, the highwayman comes riding, 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 Yes, the highwayman comes riding up to the old inn door.